Her fated mate rejected her, so his father, the Alpha King, claimed her. The night sky over Erendor stretched like black silk, dotted with silver stars that seemed to watch the world below. In the quiet village of Elmswood, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying secrets that only the gifted could hear. Among those who could listen was Lyra. She stood atop the hill outside the village, the hem of her cloak brushing the damp grass, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. Lyra's gift was rare. She could see threads of fate, the invisible bonds that tied people together, stretching forward through time. Most feared her visions, but she had learned to live with them, to let them guide her. Tonight, though, a vision had come that made her knees weak and her soul ache. Her fated mate, Kale. She had always known the prophecy. Every seer in Erendor spoke of it, though no one dared say it aloud. The seer and the prince, bound by fate, will either save or destroy the kingdom. Lyra had never imagined it would be real for her. She had imagined the dreams, the trembling hands, the pull in her chest whenever Kale was near. But reality, cruel and bitter, had its own plan. Kale, the prince, son of the Alpha King, had rejected her. The memory replayed in her mind like a storm that would not end. The festival of the moon had been beautiful, silver lanterns swinging gently in the wind, music drifting through the cobbled streets, and the smell of roasted bread filling the air. She had worn her best gown, soft green that mirrored the forest outside the village. Her heart had sung as he approached, but he had looked at her with cold eyes. "I cannot," Kale had said, his voice steady yet harsh. "We are fated, yes, but I cannot be bound to you. The prophecy, it is too dangerous. I will not drag you into what is coming." She had blinked, hoping the words were not real. I don't understand," she had whispered. "You must let it go, Lyra, forget me. It is better this way." And just like that, he had walked away, leaving her alone in the lantern-lit square, the warmth of the festival replaced with a cold that seeped into her bones. Lyra's fists clenched, the vision of rejection burning her chest. She had imagined this moment countless times, and each time she had hoped he would reach for her, that he would see her strength and courage, that he would understand the bond they shared. But now, standing on the hill with the wind tugging at her hair, she realized hope was a fragile thing, easily broken. And broken it was. A soft rustle behind her made her spin. Shadows stretched across the grass and Lyra froze, her heart jumping into her throat. A tall figure emerged, cloaked in black with an air of authority that made the night feel heavier. "Lyra," the voice rumbled, deep and commanding, yet not unkind. She swallowed. "Alpha King," she said, the words leaving her lips in a tremor. The Alpha King, ruler of Erendor, was a legend whispered across the kingdom. A man feared by enemies and respected by all, known for his strength, his cunning, and his unmatched command over the supernatural forces that roamed the land. And yet now he stood before her, calm and imposing, his eyes fixed on her like he could see every thought in her mind. "You have suffered much tonight," he said, stepping closer, his cloak brushing the grass. "The prince has rejected you, yes." Lyra's throat tightened. She nodded, unable to speak. He studied her, his expression unreadable. "Do not despair," he said after a moment. "Your fate is not yet decided." Lyra's eyes widened. "But Kale fears what he does not understand," the king interrupted gently. "You have power, Lyra, power he cannot yet accept, but that does not make you weak, far from it." Lyra felt a strange warmth at his words, but it was tinged with fear. "Why are you here?" she asked softly. "To claim what the law of Erendor allows," he said. His voice carried no malice, only certainty. "You are now under my protection." Her stomach churned, protection or possession. The words both comforted and terrified her. You cannot," she said, stepping back. I am not yours," he shook his head slightly. "I do not ask for your love, Lyra, not yet, but the law is clear. A fated bond rejected does not leave one without guidance. You will stay in the palace until the prophecy's path becomes clear." Lyra's heart sank. She had imagined rejection, yes, But she had never imagined this, being taken into the heart of the Alpha King's power, into a world of shadows, courts, and unseen danger. She felt her knees weaken, and he caught her arm, steadying her with surprising gentleness. His touch sent a shiver through her, a mixture of fear and something she could not name. "You are frightened," he observed. I don't know what to do," Lyra admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then do what the brave do," he said simply. "Follow me." They walked together through the darkened forest toward the palace, the moonlight guiding them like silver threads. Lyra's mind raced. What would it be like to live under the Alpha King's roof? Would Kale come for her? Would she ever be free? The palace loomed ahead, vast and dark, its towers cutting into the sky. Guards moved silently, bowing their heads as the Alpha King passed. Lyra felt the weight of her situation pressing down. She was no longer a girl of the village. She was now a pawn in a greater game, a key in a prophecy that had already chosen her role. Inside, the palace was colder than she expected. Stone walls rose high, echoing every step. Candles flickered along the corridors, casting shadows that danced like living creatures. The Alpha King led her to a room near the heart of the palace, its windows overlooking the vast forests and the silver river that cut through the kingdom. "You will stay here," he said, "until you understand the power you carry. Until Kale understands that fate is not to be denied." Lyra sank onto the edge of the bed, her hands trembling. I never wanted this," she whispered. "No one ever truly chooses fate," the Alpha King replied softly, "but you can choose how to meet it." The words were strange, like a promise and a warning all at once. Lyra wanted to believe them, but the ache in her chest for Kale made it almost impossible. How could she feel anything but hurt and betrayal? That night, sleep came in fits and starts. Shadows moved across the room, whispers of the palace's magic brushing against her skin, and in her dreams she saw Kale, standing in a field of silver flowers, looking at her with eyes full of fear and regret. "You should have chosen me," he whispered. Lyra woke with a start, her heart pounding. The room was silent, the candle flame flickering, but the vision lingered, more real than any shadow. She realized then that the bond between them was not so easily broken. Fate had not abandoned her. It had merely shifted its hand. Days passed, and the palace revealed its mysteries. Lyra learned of the Alpha King's rule, his command over shadow beasts and protective wards, and the dangerous politics that threatened the kingdom. Yet even as she learned, her heart remained caught between fear, longing, and a strange, growing respect for the man who had claimed her. The Alpha King watched her closely, but not with cruelty. There was something in his gaze, something unspoken, like a storm held in check. He allowed her freedom within the palace walls, testing her courage and her wisdom, pushing her to understand her visions, and yet always remaining a looming presence at her side. Lyra could not deny the pull she felt toward him. It was not Kale, it was different. It was older, deeper, heavier, like the weight of the mountains themselves pressing gently on her soul, and she hated herself for feeling it. One evening, as the moon cast silver patterns across the marble floors, the Alpha King approached her while she studied an ancient map of Urindor. "You are learning quickly," he said, his voice low. Lyra nodded. "I want to understand the prophecy, my place in all this." He knelt beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. "Knowledge is a weapon," he said, "and you, Lyra, are a weapon that has not yet been fully drawn." Her breath caught. The words were simple, but they carried weight. She understood then that she was no longer just a girl rejected by her fated mate. She was something more, something the kingdom needed. But the ache for Kale did not fade. It was always there, like a shadow at the edge of her vision, whispering of a love lost, of a choice denied. And she realized that her journey had only just begun. That night she dreamed again, but this time it was different. The Alpha King stood in the center of a shadowed throne room, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that left her breathless. "You belong to me," he said, his voice echoing in the darkness. "But even I cannot say what fate has truly written." Lyra woke, heart racing, tears in her eyes, and knew with certainty that her life had changed forever. The path ahead would be dangerous, filled with longing, fear, and power. And as the moonlight fell across the palace towers, she understood one truth above all. In Erendor, destiny was never simple and love was never easy. But destiny was calling. The palace of Erendor was vast, filled with long corridors that seemed to stretch into eternity. Every corner echoed with footsteps, whispers of long-dead rulers, and the hum of ancient magic. Lyra wandered through these halls with careful steps, the soft glow of lanterns guiding her path. Though she was now under the Alpha King's protection, the weight of her new life pressed on her shoulders like a stone. She had expected cold walls and distant faces, but the palace was alive in its own strange way. Shadows moved as if they had their own will, and doors sometimes opened or closed on their own, responding to forces she could barely understand. She realized quickly that Erendor was not just a kingdom, it was a living entity, breathing with power and secrets. The Alpha King rarely left her side. He observed quietly, allowing her to explore, yet never far enough to let her feel completely free. There was a method in his vigilance, though Lyra did not yet understand it. Every glance he cast her way was filled with intention, a mixture of scrutiny, curiosity, and something else she could not name. She was learning to move among the palace servants, to understand the hierarchy, and to navigate the subtle politics that ruled this shadowed place. Every person she met seemed to carry a secret, a hidden agenda, or a carefully guarded fear. Even those who smiled at her eyes held shadows behind their faces. One afternoon, she was in the royal library, a grand room filled with towering shelves of books that smelled of dust and magic. She traced her fingers over the spines of tomes, some older than the kingdom itself, when a shadow fell across the floor. "You study as if the world depends on it," a deep voice said. Lyra looked up. It was Kale. His dark hair fell over his forehead, eyes stormy and unreadable. She stiffened, unsure how to feel. I am learning about the kingdom," she said, keeping her voice steady. "And about the prophecy." Kale's lips pressed into a thin line. "I see. And do you think you can control it, or will it control you?" Lyra's chest tightened. His presence brought back the sting of rejection, but there was also a tension, an unspoken pull that made her heartbeat quicken. "I have to try," she said softly. Kale's gaze lingered, sharp and calculating. "You do not know what you are up against," he said. "The world beyond these walls is darker than you imagine, and fate is not always kind." Lyra nodded, trying to hide the trembling in her hands. She wanted to speak, to tell him she understood, that she felt the weight of the prophecy, but the words stuck in her throat. Kale turned and left, leaving her alone among the towering shelves, a chill settling into her bones. Days passed, and the Alpha King began to involve Lyra more in the matters of the palace. He tested her, not with cruelty, but with challenges that pushed her mind and courage. She learned to read the signs of magic in the air, to feel disturbances in the threads of fate, and to understand the subtle currents of power that moved through Erendor. One evening, he took her to the palace gardens. Moonlight bathed the marble paths and silver flowers in a soft glow. The air was cool, filled with the scent of jasmine and night-blooming roses. "You have grown stronger," the Alpha King said, his voice low and calm. "Stronger than I expected." Lyra looked at him, unsure how to respond. "Stronger, I still feel weak, helpless." "Helplessness is a choice," he said, stepping closer. "You can allow it to rule you, or you can rise above it. You are capable of more than you realize, Lyra." His words stirred something within her, a spark of courage she had not known existed. She wanted to believe him, to trust in her own strength. And yet the ache for Kale remained, like a shadow she could not shake. The nights in the palace were filled with quiet moments of tension. The Alpha King's presence was constant, commanding, and yet sometimes gentle. He allowed her to walk alone in the gardens, to study alone in the library, but he was always watching, always aware. It unsettled her, but also made her feel protected in a way she had never known. Then came the first sign of danger. A whisper in the corridors at midnight, a chill that moved against the warmth of the candles, a shadow that lingered longer than it should. Lyra felt it first, a subtle vibration in the threads of fate, a warning she could not ignore. She found the Alpha King in the war room studying a map of the kingdom. "Something stirs," she said, her voice urgent. "I can feel it, a curse or a threat. It is coming." He looked at her, his eyes dark and unreadable. "I felt it as well. You are learning quickly, Lyra. Your visions are sharpening, but this is beyond ordinary danger. It touches the bloodline, the throne itself." Lyra's stomach churned. She had always known that the prophecy carried risk, but now she realized how deep the shadows ran. The kingdom was fragile, held together by power and fear, and she was caught in the middle. "Kale, is he aware?" she asked. The Alpha King's expression tightened. "He knows something, but not enough. He fears his own power and he fears the prophecy's weight. That is why he rejected you, but fate is stronger than fear." That night, Lyra could not sleep. She wandered the corridors, drawn by a whisper she could not ignore. Shadows moved around her, bending and stretching as if alive. And in the moonlight she saw a figure, a shadowed beast, its eyes glowing red, watching her. Before she could react, a hand caught her arm. Strong, steady, and commanding. The Alpha King stood beside her, his presence like a shield against the darkness. "You are not alone," he said. "Do you see now why I claimed you?" Lyra nodded, though fear gripped her heart. The beast lunged, but with a gesture he banished it into the shadows. Lyra watched, awe and terror mixing in her chest. "You must learn control," he said. "You cannot allow fear to rule you. Power is useless if you cannot wield it." Lyra swallowed, nodding. The weight of his gaze pressed on her, a mixture of command and something more, something that stirred her in ways she did not yet understand. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between Lyra and the two men in her life grew. Kale avoided her, his eyes full of unspoken guilt and frustration. The Alpha King guided her, teaching her, challenging her, drawing out her strength. She felt torn, the ache of rejection never far, yet drawn to the mysterious man who had claimed her. One evening, as she practiced the control of her visions in the quiet of the moonlit gardens, Kale appeared again. "Why do you stay here?" he asked, voice low, almost a whisper. "Do you not long for freedom? Do you not hate this place?" Lyra turned to him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I do not know anymore. I cannot hate him. He has shown me things about myself, about strength, about what it means to survive." Kale's jaw tightened. "And yet you do not hate me for rejecting you." "I do," she said honestly, "and I do not know what I feel." He looked away, the tension in his shoulders heavy. "You should not be caught between us," he said. "It is unfair. I am unfair." "You do not know the meaning of unfair," Lyra whispered. "Not until you see what it is to be torn between duty, fear, and longing. You do not understand." Kale's eyes darkened, but he did not speak. He turned and left, leaving her alone with the moonlight, the shadows, and the ache of hearts caught in a dance they could not yet understand. The Alpha King watched from the shadows, silent, knowing. He had seen the tension, the longing, the conflict. He knew that Lyra's path would not be easy, that Kale's presence was a storm waiting to break. And yet, he also knew that she was learning, growing, and that her strength would one day shape the fate of the kingdom itself. That night Lyra dreamed again, but this time the dream was different. She saw herself standing between Kale and the Alpha King, threads of fate stretching from her heart to theirs, tangled and shining with silver light. "You cannot choose yet," a voice whispered in the shadows. "But the threads will guide you, and the darkness approaches." Lyra woke with a start, heart racing. She understood then that her life in the palace was not simply about protection. It was about learning, surviving, and preparing. And the shadows were moving faster than she had imagined. The kingdom of Urindor was alive, powerful, and dangerous. And Lyra, rejected by her fated mate, claimed by the Alpha King, was at the center of a storm that would test every thread of her courage, every spark of her heart, and every ounce of her strength. And she knew, deep in her bones, that nothing would ever be the same again. The palace of Urindor had grown quieter in the days since the first shadow appeared. Guards patrolled more vigilantly, and even the servants moved with careful steps, as if the walls themselves whispered of danger. Lyra felt the tension in every corridor, in every flickering candle, and in the threads of fate that pulsed in the air around her. She had grown stronger in her visions, more confident in reading the patterns that wove the world together. The Alpha King had been patient but firm, guiding her with a steady hand while keeping a careful watch over her. Yet no lesson in control or power could dull the ache in her heart for Kale. Kale. The memory of his rejection lingered like smoke in her chest. Every time she saw him, she felt the mixture of longing, hurt, and anger swirl inside her. And yet, he had begun to change. She noticed the way his eyes softened when he thought she wasn't looking, the subtle gestures that betrayed his concern for her safety. One evening, as the sun set behind the towering palace walls, Lyra found Kale standing at the edge of the training courtyard. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and the first hints of autumn leaves. "Lyra," he called, his voice low and hesitant. She walked toward him, unsure of what to expect. "Kale," he frowned, hands clenched at his sides. "There's something coming," he said. "Something darker than I feared. I can feel it in the threads of fate. It touches the throne, the bloodline, the kingdom itself." Lyra's stomach tightened. "I know. I've felt it too. The Alpha King, he knows and he is preparing, but we must do more. We must understand it before it reaches us." Kale's gaze dropped to the ground. "And yet I rejected you. I left you in the dark when I should have stood by you." Lyra paused, her throat tight. She wanted to reach out, to tell him it was not too late, but the words faltered. You did what you thought was best," she whispered. "Even if it hurt me, even if it was hard to bear, I understand why." Kale's eyes lifted, dark and stormy, meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart leap. Do you really understand?" Lyra nodded, though uncertainty gnawed at her. "I do, and yet I am not sure what I feel anymore. I am caught between anger and understanding, and something else I cannot name." Kale looked away, the tension in his shoulders tightening. "I cannot let you be caught in this alone," he said, "not when the darkness comes." Before she could reply, the ground trembled beneath their feet. Shadows twisted along the walls of the palace, moving as if alive, and a chill ran down her spine. The threads of fate pulsed violently in her chest, warning her of imminent danger. "The curse, it has grown stronger," Lyra said, her voice trembling. "It is here." Kale drew his dagger, eyes scanning the courtyard. "Stay close," he ordered. Before they could react, a shadowed beast emerged from the darkness. Its form was ever-changing, shifting from one shape to another, eyes glowing red with malice. It moved with unnatural speed, and every step it took seemed to warp the air around it. Lyra's vision flared, the threads of fate guiding her. She could see the patterns in the air, the weak points in the beast's form. She pointed toward a glowing seam along its side. "There!" she shouted. Kale lunged, striking with precision. The beast snarled and recoiled, but it was relentless. Lyra focused, drawing on the visions that the Alpha King had helped her master. She sent pulses of energy from her hands, forcing the beast to falter. The Alpha King appeared then, stepping from the shadows with commanding presence. His cloak billowed as he moved, and a wave of energy emanated from him, pushing the creature back. "Lyra, focus," he commanded. She did, feeling the threads of fate hum beneath her fingertips. With Kale at her side and the Alpha King lending his power, they fought the beast together. Their combined strength created a circle of light, and the creature let out a final roar before dissolving into shadows that scattered into the night. Lyra collapsed to her knees, trembling from exertion and adrenaline. Cale knelt beside her, his hands brushing her shoulders. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern etched across his face. I think so," she whispered, her chest heaved. "It was stronger than I expected." The Alpha King placed a hand on her back, steadying her. "You did well," he said, his voice deep and calm. "Stronger than I even thought possible." Lyra looked between the two men, her heart pounding. She felt an unexpected warmth toward the Alpha King, a quiet trust that had been growing since she arrived in the palace. And she felt a complicated ache for Cale, whose presence always seemed to pull her in two directions at once. "You are learning fast," the Alpha King said, his gaze lingering on her. "But this is only the beginning. The threads of fate are tangled and the darkness will return. You must be ready." Lyra nodded, though her mind was clouded with emotion. She had survived her first test, yet she knew that the challenges ahead would demand even more strength and even more courage. In the following days, Cale and Lyra spent time together, training and preparing for the growing threat. He taught her the ways of combat, how to anticipate an enemy, how to move with speed and precision. She found herself admiring his skill, his dedication, and his quiet strength. At the same time, the Alpha King continued to guide her in the mastery of her visions, teaching her to see the threads of fate with clarity and to manipulate them with precision. He was strict, demanding, and commanding, yet there was a subtle warmth in his instruction, a care that made her feel both safe and challenged. The tension between the three of them grew, a delicate and fragile dance. Cale's presence reminded her of what she had lost, of the bond she had been denied. The Alpha King's presence reminded her of what she could gain, of the strength and wisdom that came from guidance and trust. And through it all, Lyra's heart was torn, struggling to understand her own feelings amidst the chaos of destiny and danger. One evening, Lyra stood on the balcony of the palace, gazing at the silver river that wound through the kingdom. The wind tugged at her hair and the threads of fate hummed softly in the air around her. Cale appeared beside her, silent and solemn. "You are changing," he said, his voice low. "You are becoming stronger than I ever imagined." Lyra glanced at him. "I am learning. But I cannot do this alone." "You will not be alone," he said. "I will help you, even if I cannot always stand beside you." The Alpha King joined them then, his presence commanding yet calm. "Together you will face what is coming," he said. "The curse is growing, and the threads of fate are pulling us toward a storm. You must trust each other and trust yourselves." Lyra felt the weight of his words, the gravity of her situation pressing down on her. She knew that the danger ahead was greater than anything she had faced, and that the choices she made now would shape the destiny of the kingdom, and the bonds between her, Cale, and the Alpha King. That night, she dreamed again, and the dream was more vivid than ever. She saw the kingdom shrouded in darkness, the palace in flames and shadows twisting through the streets. Cale was fighting beside her, his face filled with determination and fear. The Alpha King stood at her side, commanding power and light, his eyes meeting hers with a promise she did not fully understand. "You must choose," a voice whispered in the darkness. "The threads of fate will not wait. The storm approaches, and only those who are strong will survive." Lyra woke with a start, heart racing, and realized that the storm was not just a dream. It was real, and it was coming for the kingdom. The shadows were moving faster, growing stronger, and she was at the center of it all. She rose, determination settling in her chest. She would not be a pawn of fate. She would not be broken by rejection, fear, or uncertainty. She would face the darkness, master her power, and stand strong, even if it meant facing her own heart, the pain of Cale's rejection, and the complicated bond she shared with the Alpha King. The threads of fate were tangled, yes, but Lyra understood one truth clearly. Strength came not just from power, but from courage, trust, and the willingness to face the storm, no matter the cost. And as the first hints of dawn touched the palace towers, Lyra knew that the true test was only beginning. The shadows would return, the darkness would rise, and hearts would be tested in ways she could not yet imagine. But she was ready. The storm was coming, and she would meet it head-on. The sky over Erendor was a bruised purple as dawn broke, the clouds heavy with the promise of storms. Lyra stood atop the palace walls, the wind tugging at her cloak, threads of fate vibrating beneath her fingertips. The shadows that had haunted the kingdom for weeks were gathering strength. She could feel them, cold and restless, crawling across the land like a living darkness. Beside her, Kale's hand brushed hers for a brief moment, a silent acknowledgement of trust. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice steady but edged with tension. Lyra nodded, though her chest ached with the weight of the coming battle. "I have to be. There is no other choice." The Alpha King appeared then, his presence as commanding as the palace walls themselves. "You have grown stronger than I imagined," he said, his voice carrying authority and pride. "But this trial will test everything, your courage, your skill, and your heart." Lyra swallowed, her gaze shifting between the two men. Kale's presence reminded her of the rejection she had endured, the ache of a bond denied. The Alpha King's presence reminded her of the power, guidance, and quiet trust that had been offered to her. She realized now that she could not face the darkness alone. She needed them both in different ways, yet together. The first shadow appeared as they descended into the palace courtyard. It was massive, shifting and writhing, eyes glowing red with a malice that seemed almost alive. The wind howled around them as the threads of fate pulsed violently in Lyra's chest, guiding her movements. "Focus, Lyra," the Alpha King commanded. "You can control it. You must control it." She did, drawing on the lessons he had taught her. Threads of silver light pulsed from her hands, striking the shadow with precision. Kale lunged beside her, his movements quick and skillful, striking the creature with weapons imbued with protective wards. The shadow shrieked, recoiling from the combined force of Lyra's power and Kale's skill. But it was relentless, and the darkness around them seemed to pulse in answer to its fury. "You are stronger together," the Alpha King said, his voice carrying over the chaos. He raised his hands, sending waves of energy through the courtyard, forcing the shadow to falter. "Do not let fear control you." Lyra felt the threads of fate hum beneath her fingers. She focused, weaving the strands into a shield that protected both Kale and herself. Light flashed, blinding and pure, and for a moment the shadow seemed to hesitate. Kale's voice cut through the roar of the wind. "Lyra, strike now." Summoning every ounce of courage and skill, Lyra released a wave of energy that surged through the courtyard, striking the heart of the shadow. It let out a final roar before dissipating into a cloud of darkness that scattered into the night. The three of them stood together, panting, hearts racing, eyes wide with relief and triumph. For the first time, Lyra felt the full weight of her power and the strength of their combined bond. "You did it," Kale said, his voice low, full of admiration and something unspoken. "You both did," Lyra replied, still trembling. Her gaze shifted to the Alpha King. "I couldn't have done this without you, without both of you." The Alpha King stepped closer, his eyes meeting hers with intensity. "You were never alone, Lyra. And now you understand what it means to stand in your own strength. The threads of fate have tested you, and you have not faltered." Kale's gaze softened, the anger and fear that had once shadowed his eyes replaced with a quiet respect. "I was wrong," he admitted. "I let my fear control me. I rejected you when I should have stood by your side. But I see now, I see your strength, and I am proud of you." Lyra's chest tightened at his words. She wanted to reach out, to tell him that she forgave him, that she understood. But the Alpha King's hand on her shoulder reminded her that some bonds were deeper, stronger, and more enduring. "You are both part of this now," the Alpha King said. "But the choice of destiny, of what comes next, rests with you, Lyra." The threads of fate pulsed, guiding her, whispering of the paths she could take. One path led to Kale, a bond tested and tempered by struggle, filled with longing, understanding, and unspoken promises. Another path led to the Alpha King, a bond forged through guidance, trust, and shared power, deeper than mere destiny. Lyra closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She felt the storm within her, the ache, the longing, and the courage. She understood now that love was not a simple thing. It was complex, it was difficult, and it was tied to choices that required strength of heart. I choose, she said softly. Kale's eyes widened, hope and fear mingling in their depths. The Alpha King waited silent, his hand still resting lightly on her shoulder, steady and strong. Lyra opened her eyes, looking first at Kale. "You have been my challenge, my pain, and my courage," she said. "I forgive you for the past, and I honor what we have shared. You have taught me strength in a different way." Kale stepped closer, his hand brushing hers. "And you have taught me what it means to face fear and to face the truth in my heart," he whispered. Then Lyra turned to the Alpha King, her eyes steady. "And you have shown me guidance, patience, and a power I never knew I had. You have believed in me when I could not believe in myself." The Alpha King's eyes softened, a rare vulnerability flashing across his face. "And you have given me hope that even the darkest paths can be lit by courage and trust," he said. Lyra felt the threads of fate pulse stronger than ever. She realized that both men had shaped her journey, both had been crucial to her survival, and both had touched her heart in ways that destiny had woven carefully. The sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the palace and the river beyond. The shadows had been defeated for now, scattered by their combined strength. But Lyra knew the battle was more than physical. The true challenge had been the choices she had made, facing fear, understanding power, and embracing the depth of her own heart. Kale lowered his gaze, his voice quiet. "I will fight to protect you, Lyra, not because fate demands it, but because I choose it." The Alpha King's hand remained on her shoulder, firm and reassuring. "And I will guide and protect you, not as one who claims, but as one who trusts. Your strength is yours. The kingdom's fate is ours to defend together." Lyra smiled, a sense of peace and clarity settling in her chest. For the first time, she felt truly powerful, not just because of her visions, but because she understood the strength of choice, the power of trust, and the depth of love in all its forms. Days passed, and the palace slowly returned to its quiet rhythm. The shadows had retreated, but the lessons remained. Lyra continued to train, to strengthen her visions, and to walk the halls of Urindor with confidence. She had faced fear, danger, and rejection, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more certain of her own heart. Kale and the Alpha King worked alongside her, each in their own way, teaching, guiding, and protecting. The tension that had once pulled at her heart had transformed into mutual respect, understanding, and a bond forged through trials. One evening, as the three of them stood atop the palace walls, gazing at the silver river reflecting the moonlight, Lyra felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. The threads of fate hummed softly, steady and true, weaving a new path for the kingdom and for her heart. "You have grown beyond what I imagined," the Alpha King said, his voice soft, yet filled with authority. "The kingdom will remember this day, and your courage will shape what is to come." Lyra looked at Kale, then back at the Alpha King. "And I have learned that fate is not just about bonds or prophecy," she said. "It is about choice, courage, and the strength to face the darkness in the world and in ourselves." Kale smiled faintly, a rare warmth lighting his features. "And I will not make the same mistake again," he said. "I will stand by you as a friend, as a protector, as someone who believes in what you can become." The Alpha King's gaze softened, and for the first time, Lyra saw a hint of pride and hope in his eyes. "And I will continue to guide you, not to control you, but to help you realize the power you carry." The wind rustled through the trees below, carrying the faint scent of silver flowers and distant forests. The night sky stretched endlessly, stars gleaming like tiny threads of destiny themselves. Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the calm after the storm, the quiet after the shadows had passed, and the certainty of her own strength. She had faced rejection, danger, and the pull of hearts torn between destiny and choice. She had survived. She had grown. And she had discovered the truth of power, courage, and love. The threads of fate were no longer a mystery. They were hers to weave, to guide, and to protect. And she would do so with strength, wisdom, and the courage to choose her own path, whatever storms might come. As the moonlight bathed the palace in silver, Lyra felt a quiet peace settle in her heart. The kingdom was safe for now. The shadows were gone. And in the bond she shared with Kale and the Alpha King, she found strength, understanding, and the promise of a future shaped by courage, love, and choice. The threads of fate were strong, the kingdom alive, and Lyra ready. The storm had passed, and the dawn of a new destiny had begun.